Let's cultivate our motivation. And with a sense of dependency on others, feeling gratitude for all that we have received, and especially feeling fortunate to have this life with the opportunity to practice the Dharma. Then let's have a solid determination to use our time wisely to repay the kindness of others, specifically by progressing along the path to full awakening, so that we can gain the wisdom and compassion and skillful means and power necessary to most effectively be of benefit. So if we really want to be of benefit, we have to purify our own mind, get rid of all the afflictions on it, all the junk that has been accumulated on it since beginningless time. So, because if we don't, then we're just going to be muddling through, kind of the blind leading the blind. So with the motivation, not only for our own happiness, but really to be able to work for the benefit of others, then we know we have to work on ourselves first. Yeah, it's like if you want to be a doctor, you don't just pull out a stethoscope and a knife and go to it. You go to school first. Yeah, you learn, you prepare yourself. So in the same way, we work on ourselves, on our own mind, and progress along the path for the benefit of others. Okay? So in this path, we're working for the benefit of both ourselves and others. Yeah? It's not just, others are most important, and we neglect ourselves because that is off balance. And also it's not all about me, because we see what happens when it's like that. It's a mess. So, sometimes when we begin to practice the Dharma, we make it all about me. Yeah, my Dharma practice. Yeah, what I want to learn, the retreats I want to do, where I can go to learn, the people I want to be around, what place is best for me, what teacher do I like. Yeah, it's the whole I trip again. Yeah, because we think it's all about me. Except now instead of, my career and my money and my love affair, it's, my Dharma practice, but it's still all about me. Yeah. And so it's very easy, especially at the beginning, to have that kind of thought. And it can take years to really realize that we have it. Because at the beginning we think, but now I'm doing Dharma, so I'm so magnanimous. Yeah. And I say I'm doing it for the benefit of all sentient beings. But I sure wish they would shut up and leave me alone so I could focus on my practice. Yeah. And I sure wish they'd stop asking me to do some work for this or that or the other thing, because I'm trying to develop compassion for them. And I need my time and my privacy to develop compassion. Okay? And I need the right teacher and the right center and the right practice and everything at the right time. Like really, getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning is really the best time for me. Any earlier just doesn't work. So, the schedule has to, wake up at 8, then first breakfast, because otherwise you can't meditate if you're hungry. So you eat breakfast, Yeah, then you read the paper. Then you have to start cooking lunch. So, maybe some meditation after lunch, but then you have to take your nap because you're tired. You're digesting your food. You don't want to strain yourself. Yeah. And so it goes. It's all about me. So somehow we have to, really see that it's not about me, On one hand, like I said this morning, we're precious in the sense that we each have individual talents and abilities, and we each have the Buddha nature, and this is something really to respect in ourselves and in others, On the other hand, life is not all about what I want. And somehow we hear this a lot and we still think it is. Life should be all about what I want. What I need. Oh yeah. It's not just I want. That's a little bit too impolite. It's a need, and you can't question my needs. Because a need is a need. Yeah, a want you can, criticize, but a need, I need to get up at 8. No earlier. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. And so samsara continues on, doesn't it? It just continues on, we just continue doing the same old thing, different bodies, different names, different likes and dislikes, but we continue doing the same old thing. I want what I want when I want it. Other people should do what I want. They should be what I want. The world should be the way I think it should be. You'd think by now we would get really bored. Doing the same thing every lifetime, having the same self-centered thought every lifetime. We should really try something new and exciting, like transforming our mind. Yeah. But somehow that's not exciting enough, you have to sit still. And then you have to look at what's going on in your mind. Oh, yuck. Yeah. So, anyway, let's get back to His Holiness. This is what I want to do. Okay, so we're at the part where he's going to start talking about dependence on parts. Now, before going into this section, when we talk about dependence, there's different ways of talking about it. Sometimes they talk about 3 types of dependence. Causal dependence, the fact that things are dependent, functioning things, impermanent things depend on their causes and conditions. And then second, second is dependent on parts. So that wholes, what something is depends on its parts. And then third is dependent on term and concept, that things need to be conceived. The mind needs to conceive and label them. Okay? So that's one way in which it's the dependence is commonly taught in those 3 ways. But His Holiness often speaks of it in a slightly different way, talking first about 2 kinds of dependence. The first being causal dependence, and the second being dependent designation, that things are dependent on being imputed or designated. And then within that category of dependent designation, he breaks that into 2. And there, one is mutual dependence or relational dependence, and the second is dependent on term and concept, or dependent on basis of designation and designating term. Okay, so it's a slightly different way. Yeah, but both ways of talking about dependence are both valid. Okay, so here he's going to start off talking about dependence on parts. Okay, dependent arising also refers to the fact that all phenomena, impermanent and permanent, okay, exist in dependence upon their own parts. Everything has parts. A pot, for instance, exists in dependence upon its parts, whether we consider coarse parts such as the lid, handle, or opening, or subtle parts such as atoms and molecules. Without its essential parts, a pot simply cannot be. It does not exist in the concrete, independent way that it seems to. Okay, so here again we have the appearance of things seeming to exist in concrete, independent ways, and then seeing that no, they actually depend upon parts. And when we mentally dissect them into their parts, they cease to be so concrete. Okay, so it's interesting when, let's say you're having trouble with a person, then you mentally dissect that person into parts. Yeah, there's the body, there's the mind. In their body, there's the head, and what is it? Head and nail. No, I was thinking the one we do as kids with head, shoulders, knees and toes. Yeah, so there's the head, shoulder, knees and toes. Yeah, and knees and mouth and nose. Oh, eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Okay, yeah. Oh, okay. So, there's all these parts. So when you think of a person you're having difficulty with, and you dissect them into these parts mentally, yeah. then somehow they don't seem so inherently disgusting, do they? I mean, it's just kind of parts, that's all. That's all it is. Okay. Similarly, if you think of a person that is just wonderful and you're over the top with them, and then you dissect them into parts, you have a whole different picture of them. Okay, and similarly, they don't seem so enticing after that. Yeah. So somehow just, you can see how the mind combines parts and then fabricates, some kind of whole that exists in and of itself, and then attributes all these outstandingly positive or negative qualities to that. Okay, you can begin to understand how our mind works, and watch how our mind works. Watch it as it's doing this. Okay, but really seeing that when we see parts, things don't. Our attitude towards them changes. Yeah, especially when your mind is saying, I really need this. Yeah. I need, what is it? What do you really need?
Coffee.
Okay, I need coffee. And then you start breaking coffee into its parts. All the molecules. Yeah. Are any of the molecules themselves coffee? Yeah, you probably have carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and hydrogen, and I don't know what caffeine is made out of. But you have all that stuff. None of that stuff is coffee, is it? Okay. Or you break coffee into parts in another way. Is coffee the smell? Is it the taste? Is it the heat? is the wetness. Okay. What quality is coffee? Okay. What exactly are you craving? Yeah. You want the heat? Well, we can give you lots of heat. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want the taste? Well, we could give you, something that's coffee flavored but with a totally different texture and totally different temperature. So it's interesting, exactly what is the coffee and exactly what is it that we're craving. Yeah. See, chocolate you can't find anything. I mean, coffee you can't find anything, Chocolate has inherent pleasure. No, unfortunately, I'm joking with that one too. Okay. What about the atomic particles that are the building blocks of larger objects? Could they be partless? Okay. This too is impossible, since if a particle did not have spatial extent, it could not combine with other particles to form a larger object. Particle physicists believe that even the tiniest particle can be broken down into smaller parts if we can create tools powerful enough to do so. But even if they found a physically unbreakable entity, it would still have spatial extent and thus parts. Otherwise, it could not combine with other such entities to form anything larger. Okay, so everything you can think of has parts. Yeah. Did you ever see this movie? I saw it many years ago. It started out with some people in a rowboat, and then the camera went into space.
Yeah, Powers of 10.
Powers of 10? Okay. Something, yeah. Yeah, it was incredible. And the camera goes into the atmosphere, and so the people get smaller, and then, you see the lake, and then you see the continent, and then finally you're way out there, and you see so many, like it's become invisible. And other things are prominent. And then it goes back down to the people in it, in the boat, and then it focuses, I don't know, on their hand or their head or something, and starts going smaller into there, and you see the parts of the hand, and then the cells, and then the parts of the cells, and the DNA and RNA, and then, those, all their parts and everything like that. Yeah. So it's this whole thing of, really seeing how things are made of parts, and how something can disappear or appear depending on whether you're looking at its parts or not. Yeah. The people in the rowboat, become minuscule when compared to the rest of the universe, and become huge once you go down and look at their cells. Okay, but the idea is that everything has parts, so you can never reach really a smallest part that can never be divided. Yeah?
What are permanent phenomena?
Permanent phenomena is something like space, and here there's two kinds of space. Here's the kind of space that is the lack of obstructibility and tangibility. So permanent phenomena are always the lack of something. So emptiness, for example, is also a permanent phenomena. True cessations are permanent phenomena. Okay, so permanent means it doesn't change momentarily due to causes and conditions. Okay, then there's a meditative reflection. So here's something for you to ponder in your next session. Bring to mind an impermanent phenomena, such as a book. Consider its coming into being in dependence upon its parts, its pages and its covers. So you mentally dissect it. See if its dependence upon parts conflicts with its appearing as if it exists in its own right. Does it conflict? If we take the parts apart and scatter them around, does it conflict with the image we have right now of the book as being one thing in and of itself? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Okay. Think of a person. Yeah, and how they appear, one solid thing. Then in your mind, dissect them into parts. Liver, a couple of kidneys, some blood vessels, a spleen, some intestines, some bones, some muscles, teeth. Yeah. Then does that conflict with how you usually apprehend the person as one solid thing? It really does, doesn't it? Yeah. So again, we see the difference between something appearing as one whole object from its own side versus what it actually is, which is simply an accumulation of parts. So everything is simply an accumulation of parts. And the parts aren't the object. Yeah, the parts are not the object. Are any of the parts of a car a car? No. Are any of the particles of chocolate cake the cake? Are any of the organs of your friend your friend? So none of the parts are the object. But where is the object? When you look there, when we look here, we look and we say, there's the book. But none of these things is a book. What do you think? Yeah, here's a book, but nothing here is a book. Yeah, nothing here is a book. This is not a book, and this is not a book, and this is not a book. And you're going to say, well, the whole thing put together is a book. But all that is the whole thing put together is a collection of non-books. Yeah? So you put together a bunch of non-books, and then you have a book. Does that make sense? But there's a book here. But nothing is a book here. Okay, there's a person here, right? There's a person here. Yeah, what is this person? What is this person? Yeah, is this the person? This little piggy went to market. This little piggy. Yeah, is this a person? Is this a person? Is this a person? Is this a person? Is the voice the person? Is the mind the person? Which mind? Sleeping mind? Mm-hmm. Distracted mind? What are you going to point to as a person? There's no person here. But there's a person here. Yeah?
One of the phrases that kept coming to mind as I was reading the beginning part of the book was process.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about the liver as the process of the liver and the functioning of the liver, the developmental movement and the liver. And a moment-to-moment arising of each of the organs, and a moment-to-moment arising of the structure that makes it. It seems to make more sense.
So seeing the different organs in terms of their function
And process.
and process. But still the organs aren't the person, and the processes aren't the person. Yeah, you wouldn't say, oh, there's digestion walking by. Yeah?
With the example of the book, that it's not any of the individual pages, for instance, but it is a book when it's this collection of parts. Does that speak to the idea of designation, that we call it a book?
Well, how did this become a book? How did a bunch of non-books become a book?
We decided it was a book.
Yeah, we all just had this conception and gave it the term book. Otherwise, how in the world did a bunch of non-books become a book?
But doesn't that go with what she was saying about it functions as a book, so it's a book? It functions as a book.
How can you say it functions as a book if there's no book?
Well, if it's, who said the way we think is logical? I mean,
There's a book here,
there's a book there,
but nothing is the book.
nothing is the book. So, but it has function.
Yeah, it has function.
So that's
Yeah, but how can it function as a book if we don't have the idea of a book?
well, it can.
Unless we have the idea of a book, it can't function as a book.
But where did the idea of a book come from if there were no books to put that label onto? We got chicken and egg thing happening.
Yeah, but if there were something that were already a book, you wouldn't need to put the label on it because it would already be a book. So we put the label. The label comes in dependence upon something that isn't a book. Because if something were already a book, you wouldn't need to call it a book. Yeah. And this can't function as a book if there were no human beings who needed books. This is not a book from its own side. It's only a book and function as a book according to the definition of book because we created that definition and conceived of this object and imputed that definition and had it function in that way. Yeah. In another society, they might call it a roll of toilet paper. Yeah? Or they might call it who knows what, some, what is silverfish food. Yeah?
Sure, a bookworm just sees it as food.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so bring to mind an impermanent phenomena such as a book. Consider its coming into being in dependence upon its parts, its pages, and its cover. Okay? And see if its dependence upon parts conflicts with its appearing as if it existed in its own right. Okay? So then consciousness. The consciousness involved in looking at a blue vase. They always use vases as an example. Vases are so boring. I don't know if that's why they look at them. What's something interesting? No. Okay. The consciousness involved in looking at a blue vase. does not have spatial parts because it is not physical, but it exists as a continuum of moments. Okay, so that here you're talking about your eye consciousness that is apprehending this blue vase. Okay? Or maybe your eye consciousness apprehending Lady Gaga.
As a blue vase.
Yeah. Or, Lawrence Welk or whoever it is. Okay. Because it's not physical, but it exists as a continuum of moments. Consciousness looking at a blue vase has earlier and later moments in its continuum, and these are parts of a stream of consciousness, no matter how short. Okay, so no matter how long you're looking at this blue vase, yeah, there's all these different moments of consciousness. It isn't just one one whole consciousness apprehending the vase. It's a series of moments that make up a stream, okay, to apprehend the vase. Then consider the briefest moment in the continuum. How long is a nanosecond? Is it the briefest moment?
No, there is no briefest moments. There's hyper moments and femto moments.
So they haven't come up with the briefest moment yet. But
It lives with the smallest part.
yeah, it's like the smallest part. It can always be something that is subdivided. So then consider the briefest moment in a continuum. Even if the briefest of moments did not have a beginning, middle, and end, it could not join with other brief moments to become a continuum. Okay? It would be equally close to an earlier moment and to a later moment, in which case there would be no continuum at all. So for there to be a series of small moments that make a continuum, each of those small moments has to have a beginning, middle, and end. And the beginning also has a beginning, middle, and end. And the beginning of that also has a beginning, middle, and end. Okay? Because everything needs this kind of difference. Otherwise, you couldn't have a series. Everything would merge just into one undifferentiated moment, which couldn't be because it couldn't have parts either. So everything would kind of collapse on each other, on itself. As Nagarjuna says, just as a moment has an end, so it must have a beginning and a middle. Also, the beginning, middle, and end are to be analyzed like the moment. Yeah?
Also, can consciousness be divided by the parts of the thing it apprehends? Like I'm looking at a flower,
Mm-hmm.
and the parts of the consciousness perceiving the flower are the consciousnesses perceiving the petals and the stem.
Oh, there's a whole debate about that. Yeah, but when they talk about consciousness, they're talking about not the object as apprehending, but the consciousness itself as a series of moments.
That's what I'm saying. Can
Yeah.
consciousness perceive flower divided according to the parts of the thing perceived?
Yeah, but that wouldn't be a continuum of moments. Yeah. Well, see, there's this big debate that's going to take us off the subject of whether, does one consciousness perceive all the different colors? Or do you have one consciousness perceiving this and another consciousness perceiving that and another consciousness, and then the mind puts them all together? Yeah. But that's, that to me at least is a different topic. Here we're just talking about just think of, maybe that's why they talk about blue. It's just blue. You can't differentiate a blue petal and a blue this and a blue that. Yeah. So it's just, the moments of the consciousness apprehending it. Okay. So here's another reflection. Consider consciousness paying attention to a blue vase. How about a green tablecloth? Okay, consciousness paying attention to a green tablecloth. Reflect on its coming into being. The consciousness is coming into being. In dependence upon its parts. The several moments that constitute it, its continuum. Okay, so look at the tablecloth. Yeah. And then think of the moments of your visual consciousness that's apprehending that green tablecloth. Okay? So that consciousness has parts, doesn't it? Yeah. We say the mind apprehending the green tablecloth, but in fact, it's a series of moments, and each moment has a beginning, middle, and end. Okay. See if its dependence upon its parts conflicts with its appearing as if it exists in its own right. Does, doesn't it? Okay, then another one, examining space. Even space has parts, such as the space associated with particular directions, such as the space in the east and the space in the west, or the space in this object and the space in that object. Okay, so then the reflection for this is, consider space in general, the lack of obstructability and tangibility. Okay, reflect on its coming into being in dependence upon its parts, north, south, east, and west. See if its dependence upon its parts conflicts with its appearing as if it exists in its own right. Yeah. Even thinking, north, south, east, and west? What makes something north, south, east, and west? Where you are again. See, he thinks it's all about him. Actually, he's in the north. Yeah, he's the north. Okay, so just the discrimination into directions is quite arbitrary, isn't it? Something really labeled. Okay. Also, consider the space of a cup. Reflect on its coming into being in dependence upon its cup, on its parts, the top half, the bottom half, and the bottom half of the cup. So the space occupied by the cup depends on the cup. So you can't have the space occupied by the cup without having the cup. So that's going to depend on the top half of the cup and the bottom half of the cup. See if its dependence upon its parts conflicts with its appearance as if it exists in its own right. Yeah. So here, what His Holiness is doing is, again, getting us to see that how things appear as one whole concrete thing is not how they actually exist, and we're using reasoning to show that to us, to prove that to ourselves. Okay? Yeah?
You had described space as the lack of obstructability and something else for that.
Tangibility. Okay. Then chapter 5, appreciating the reasoning of dependent arising. So it starts with a quote from Nagarjuna's Karikas, the fundamental treatise on the middle called Wisdom. Because there are no phenomena that are not dependent arisings, there are no phenomena that are not empty of inherent existence. This is one of the most famous verses of that treatise. As explained in the previous chapter, all phenomena, whether impermanent or permanent, have parts. The parts and the whole depend on It should be each other. Yeah, because something can't be a part unless there's a whole. And something can't be a whole unless there's a part. You can't have a car if you don't have car parts. And you can't have car parts unless you have a car. But now somebody's saying, but there's a wheel and it's a car part and there's no car there. There doesn't have to be a car there for that to be a car part. There just has to be the potential for a car, the idea of a car, for the wheel to be a car part. Okay? But the whole and the parts don't exist without each other. You can't have a building without building parts. You can't have a person without person parts of the person. Anything you can think of, you can't have it without there being parts to it. And none of the things become parts unless there's a whole. Yeah? I mean, this little square inch doesn't become a part of a tablecloth unless there's a tablecloth. Okay? It might be, if we cut it out and put it somewhere, we might say, oh, there's a swatch of green fabric. But we wouldn't call it a part of a tablecloth. Yeah? Because that you wouldn't recognize as a part of a tablecloth, would you? Yeah?
Unless it was my tablecloth.
Oh. This was your tablecloth?
My tablecloth, and you cut a little piece out of it and say, that's part of my
Tablecloth, yeah. Now you have more than one tablecloth. You have the little tablecloth and the big tablecloth. Because if you think tablecloth exists in that whole piece of fabric, when you look at the piece of fabric and you say this is a tablecloth with the idea that tablecloth exists in that fabric, then when you cut a piece out, you would have two tablecloths. Wouldn't you? And if you cut another piece out, you would have three tablecloths.
There's a logical way to increase your wealth. You can take all your money and put it through a shredder.
Yeah. If things were inherently existent, that would work. Yeah? This is one of the arguments that's used to disprove inherent existence, you know. But if things were inherently existent, if the money, the wealth existed within that paper, you would definitely increase it by putting it through the shredder. Mm. Okay. Let's see. The parts and the whole depend on each other, but they seem to have their own entities. Yeah. If the whole and its parts existed the way they appear to you, you should be able to point out a whole that is separate from its parts, but you cannot. Yeah. It's a very interesting exercise to do as you walk around during the day. Yeah. Is to watch, you know, that's a bell. Yeah. But what are its parts? Okay. That's a bell. Is it one thing, or are there many parts there? And, you know, have your mind go in and out between seeing the whole and seeing the parts, and seeing the whole and seeing the parts. Here's the book, but there are many pages. Yeah, so where's the book? Here's the clock, but there, you know, it's one, looks like one thing, but there are many parts. So you go in and out between whole and parts, and watch how the thing looks very different to you, depending on whether you concentrate on the whole or concentrate on the parts. Are you getting what I'm meaning? Yeah? Okay. And then see, you know, it can you point out the whole separate from the parts? There is a conflict between the way the whole and the parts appear and the way they actually exist. But this does not mean there are no wholes. Okay? Because if wholes did not exist, you could not speak of something as being a part of anything. That's what I was saying. If you don't have a whole, such as a car, you can't speak of car parts. Yeah. The conclusion must be that there are wholes, but their existence is set up in dependence upon their parts. They do not exist independently. As Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise on the middle, called Wisdom, says, that which arises dependently is not one with that on which it depends, and it is also not inherently other than it. Hence, it is not nothing and not inherently existent. Let's go through that one again. Okay. That which arises dependently, let's take the book, is not one. It's not one and the same thing with that on which it depends. So what does it depend on? The pages, the cover, the binding. Okay? So is it one and the same with either the pages, the cover, or the binding? No. Okay. And it is also not inherently other than that. In other words, can you locate the book separate from the pages, the cover, and the binding? No. You can't have the pages and cover and binding here and the book here. Okay, you can't. It's not inherently other than it. Hence, it is not nothing. It's not that there's no book here. There's something here. And it is not inherently existent. In other words, it is not a book existing from its own side, under its own power, self-enclosed. Okay? So how the reasoning of dependent arising works. Dependent or independent, there is no other choice. Okay? So things are either dependent or they are independent. Yeah? When something is one, either dependent or independent, it is definitely not the other. Because dependent and independent are a dichotomy, when you see that something cannot be independent or functioning under its own power, there is no other option but to see that it is dependent. So if we can see that something is not independent and prove that to ourselves, then the only conclusion we can come to is that it is dependent. Because dependent and independent are a dichotomy. In other words, everything that exists is either one or the other. There's no other option. Would you say that? Would you agree with that? Yeah? No? There's some other option besides dependent and independent? You can't find another option. Okay? Yeah?
That's how my mind works.
What do you mean?
That's how we think about things. I think that they're both dependent and independent.
Yeah.
That's what gets us in trouble, is thinking that way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's been a question over here.
I gave it to him. I tossed him the ball, and he's like, "Oh, all right, touchdown." Okay, what about forces? It does take like basic, each and every something has an equal opposite reaction. Action is an equal opposite reaction, right? So that.
Yeah.
But once that force is in motion,
Mm-hmm.
how do you parse force?
Well, force is a dependent phenomena, isn't it?
Up to a point, and then what created that phenomenon is, like, for example, every part can be pulled apart to a smaller part, right?
Right.
Okay, so when you get to a force, you've got, I don't know, the log made of cards, it strikes the striker is made card that strikes the gong. The strike the gong is what is that force? Not trajectory, is that? It causes vibration. The vibration is the gong itself. Motion, trajectory motion. If you
Yeah.
Momentum.
Yeah.
Something out, and then once the thing is the thing you're propelling, you don't have to shoot anything out. You can just shoot the force of the shoot of something out.
Yeah.
Gravity.
Yeah, but all those things are dependent.
Up to this moment.
You know, they're totally dependent on other things.
When it cease,
What?
as long as you're applying the force, that force depends on the two physical bodies and on the electromagnetic forces in those two physical bodies. At the moment you release it and the object is going on its own momentum,
It's decreasing the force. Yeah.
The force is-
in
the
a
force is-
fictionless environment, not so. In space, not so.
the force has ceased to exist.
No, because in space that's not so. There's no friction. It's in a frictionless environment.
That's not true, Dennis, that's not true. Physics does not say that. The force,
It's been transformed into,
that's right,
Yeah.
it's been transformed.
Yeah.
A body in motion tends to stay in motion until it's acted upon by another source,
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
she's trying to say.
Right. Yeah. But that's still dependent.
The
Yeah.
force does not, if the reason why Newton said that was because the transformation of the force into the motion of the object.
I said that wrong though. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But
Newton totally agrees with Buddhism.
okay. Yeah. So let's come back here. You know, but still we can see that a force is dependent, isn't it? You know, it's not something that appears out of nowhere. Yeah. So things are either dependent or they're independent. Yeah?
Is there anything that is independent? Because I'm having trouble thinking of anything that is independent.
Yeah, well, good. That's very good. That's one of the things to really ask ourselves. You know, I see all these things as independent, but what could actually be independent?
My first thought was the mountains, but an earthquake had to form the mountain, and other things came in.
And it has parts.
Wearing away.
Yeah, it's wearing away, it's changing. Yeah. So this is the whole point, that everything looks to us as concrete, independent. But when we really sit and ask ourselves, you know, can I point to something that is in fact independent of any other factor? What in the world are we going to point to? Yeah. So keep looking, keep looking. I'd like to keep reading, actually. Yeah. So dependent or independent, there is no other choice. When something is one, it is definitely not the other. Because dependent and independent are a dichotomy, when you see that something cannot be independent or functioning under its own power, there is no other option but to see that it is dependent. Being dependent, it is empty of being under its own power. Okay? So if something is not independent, it must be dependent. Okay? If it's dependent, then it does not exist under its own power. Okay, this is important. If it's dependent on other things, it means that it doesn't self-create itself or self-sustain itself or exist, you know, as a concrete, identifiable, permanent thing. Yeah, it's empty of existing under its own power. It's empty of existing from its own side. It's empty of being a self-enclosed, inherently existent phenomena. Okay? So here what we're getting at is dependence and emptiness of inherent existence come to the same point. If something's one, it's also the other. So if something is dependent, it's empty of inherent existence. Okay? Look at it this way. A table depends for its existence on its parts. So we call the collection of its parts the basis upon which it is set up. Okay? When we search analytically to try to find this table that appears to our minds as if it exists independently, we must look for it within this basis, the legs, the top, and so forth. But nothing from within the parts is such a table. It's doing what with a table what we just did with the book. Okay? Thus, these things that are not a table become a table in dependence upon thought. A table does not exist in its own right. So the pages and the cover and the binding become a book in dependence on thought. Does something in your mind say, no, that can't be right? My thought can't make a book? There's no way my mind can make this thing into a book. It's a book out there. Because it looks like a book out there, doesn't it? Yeah. When you say, thus, those things that are not a table become a table in dependence upon thought. Okay? Yeah. Thus, these things, all these parts that are not a table, become a table depending upon thought. So all these non-tables, the legs, the top, whatever else is part of a table, all these non-tables become a table dependent on thought. Yeah. One part of us goes, yeah, just a bunch of things put together dependent on thought. But when you look at this thing, does this look like it became a table dependent on thought? No. It's not a table dependent on thought. It's a table because it has table character inside of it. It does, isn't it? It looks like it has something that it is a table. Okay, I can't point to what exactly it is the table, but it is a table, for sure. Yeah? So there's some difference between the way it's appearing to me and the way I think, look, I can bang it. It's a table. It didn't become bangable dependent on my thought. Does your mind kind of rebel against this thing that just concept and term can make it into something? Yeah, sometimes my mind's like, no, it can't be that way. And then other times I can look at it and say, yeah, that's the only way. It became a table. It's dependent on concept and thought. But no, that can't be that way. But it can't be any other way either.
My mind is not strong enough to eat you up so from here, so I have to go.
Okay.
Doesn't observing animals kind of help with that as well? Maybe Jack can talk to this with you. Looked at a lot of animals, but you're imputing all kinds of stuff to the table. You think, no, I can put dinner on it, or I can sit here and do this license in here. But allow any number of animals in here, and they would not perceive the table at all.
You mean they wouldn't perceive a table at all? They wouldn't walk on it?
They would see a table, they would see something to climb up on or whatever, but it would have no tableness to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a table to your dog. And if you're a termite, it will look like food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, that's true. Doesn't it still, from our viewpoint, seem like, okay, they can see it as food, they can see it as a jumping place, but that's just to their appearance, because it really is a table. Huh? What do you think? Uh-huh.
I think where I get stuck is not so much, okay, it doesn't exist as a table, but it still exists. Existence is there.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be a table until it's labeled as a table.
But there's something hard there.
There is an existence.
Basis of designation
there.
is real.
That's sort of right.
Yeah. There's definitely pieces of wood here, right?
At the moment someone says, yes, calls it a piece of wood, what is it before that?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, so what is there before we can actually have words put on it?
Right.
The collective understanding that, like, if I say, no, that's not a table, that's, your footrest, this is a footrest. If everyone keeps saying, like, it's a table, and using it as a table, it holds that tableness in existence.
So we give it tableness, and then it radiates tableness. Yeah.
Label stuff.
Huh?
It's like we have to label things, because otherwise our mind just goes, if we don't have a label for it, how do we use it? Or what do we, how do we communicate with it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's that crazy feeling, like if I don't have a label for it.
Yeah. Well, it's also a thing of picking out certain characteristics in the environment and putting them together to make an object. For example, a baby would not see this as one object. Yeah, because babies don't have the depth perception that we do and can't, see that. It may see colors and shapes, but it wouldn't necessarily put those together to form a discrete object. Yeah, when babies cry, they get scared by their own cry. Because they don't realize it's coming from them. Yeah? So, does this become a table just dependent on thought? Yeah. Then can my thought make this into a table? This is a table. I have the thought. It's a table.
Does it perform a function?
Yeah, see, I put my book on it. Yeah. I can rest my elbows on it. Yeah.
So the concept, if the table is not the parts, it's the concept of it, then for the ant, that is a table. Or so that it can exist as a table for thou, the sentient being that holds it as.
So is a table just a concept?
Yeah.
It's just a concept? So I'm putting my elbows on a concept?
The concept.
Am I really putting my elbows on a concept?
No, it's not just a concept.
It would be if
There's a basis.
If the basis and the label were the same, you would be.
Mm-hmm. Well, what am I putting my elbows on?
That flat thing there.
She's almost 60 years old and she still can't say this is a table. Really? Your parents never taught you this was a table?
That's the point. My parents never taught me that this was a table because they've never seen it.
What?
That instance of, they never saw that particular instance. My parents never saw that particular instance of a table, so they would not teach me to call that instance of the table a table.
But they taught you the generality of
They
table.
taught me the generality of how to determine a table from everything else that I'm looking at, yes.
Yeah.
And I have to apply that at this moment to this instance to say, oh, okay, the table's fine.
Mhm.
But there has to be a basis for me to do that.
Mhm.
I'm not good enough at clairvoyance to visualize a table right here and then stand on it 3 feet off the air. I can't do that.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah?
So I go hiking up in Canada, and there's a place where there's a mountain, and it's called Table Mountain.
Mhm.
So, how does one
Yeah.
bring
Yeah.
that into this?
Right. Because if this were inherently a table, then anything you called table should be this. So, so then Table Mountain would be this.
But like La Mesa is the table. La Mesa is always so used for them. La Mesa, it's
Yeah, La Mesa is also. Okay, so can one object have multiple words? Yeah.
This gadget here with pipes and electric wires and lights is also a table.
Okay. Yeah. So does one word, I mean, if things really have their own nature, then you should have a one-to-one correspondence between an object and a word. So if this is a table, nothing else could be a table. And you couldn't have La Mesa and table refer to the same object. Yeah, because there'd have to be a one-to-one correspondence.
It's like a book. You get in trouble with the law and go down to the big house, they're going to book you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So, so is something just a label? Is the table just a label? Is the table just a concept? No, it's not just a label or a concept. Yeah. Does it exist without depending on a concept and a label? No. But if you have a concept and a label, do you automatically have a table? What else do you need? Parts. Okay, so you have 4 legs, one there, one there, one there, one there, and a top that's leaning against the wall. So now you have a table. Why not? You have the parts. You just told me it depended on the parts.
Some assembly required.
Okay. So you put the flat one down, and you put 4. It's just they're assembled.
If I were to go to the store and buy a table, it's not assembled yet, but it would be correct to say, I just bought this table.
Ah. Oh, now that's interesting. I just bought this table, even though what you bought was the table kit.
Yeah, the parts.
The parts. You bought the parts, and you say, I bought the table. Yeah. In the same way, you plant a seed, and you say, I'm growing a tree. Yeah. Yeah, right. So when did that become Chenrezig Hall? Yeah. Okay. So there's something to think about here. You know, what's the relationship between the concept and the word and the parts and the arrangement of the parts? You know, is the arrangement of the parts the table? Yeah, is that it? The arrangements of the parts? But then, you know, when you walk in here, you just say, it's a table. And you hit it, and, you know, there's definitely something there. So it's quite interesting to think about here. Let me just finish this section. From this viewpoint, a table is something that arises or exists dependently. It depends on certain causes, it depends on parts, and it depends on thought. Okay, all three of those. These are the three modes of dependent arising. Of these, one of the more important factors is the thought that designates an object. Existing in dependence upon conceptuality is the most subtle meaning of dependent arising. Nowadays, physicists are discovering that phenomena do not exist objectively in and of themselves, but exist in the context of involvement with an observer. For example, the Dalai Lama's eye, this one, not this one. The Dalai Lama's eye must be within this area where my body is. There is no other place it could possibly be found. This is clear. But when you investigate in this area, you cannot find an eye that has its own substance. Nevertheless, the Dalai Lama is a man, a monk, a Tibetan, who can speak, eat, drink, and sleep. This is sufficient proof that he exists, even though he cannot be found. Okay, so something exists, even though it can't be found? But I find it. I find the table. I know where the table is. What's he saying? You can't find it. I found it. It's here. But when I look in its parts, I can't find it.
You cannot find an inherently existing table. Can't find it upon analysis.
Yeah, I can't find it upon analysis, but when I don't analyze. This means that there is nothing to be found that is the I, but this fact does not imply that the I does not exist. How could it? That would be silly to say that, nothing exists. The I definitely does exist, but when it exists, it yet cannot be found, we have to say that it arises in dependence upon thought. It cannot be posited in any other way. Okay? So the I definitely does exist, but when it exists, yet cannot be found. So the I is there, but you can't find what is the I when you search for it. We have to say that it arises in dependence upon thought. Why would it have to arise in dependence upon thought if it exists and yet you can't find it? It exists, but you can't find it in the basis when you're analyzing.
It doesn't exist objectively, it has to be existing subjectively?
Yeah, it has something to do with that. If it's not there, then, to be found there, then there's a piece of this dependent process that's missing. Yeah, because you have the basis. But this doesn't become the basis of designation of the table until you have the table. Because how can you say it's the basis of designation of a table if you don't have a table? So the basis of designation of the table and the table arise at the same time, even though this thing existed before. Okay. So where did we get to? Okay, 63. So think about that. Yeah, just one question, then we have to stop. Oh, give me the book.
Something arises.
The basis of designation this thing, I mean all these parts, and the labeled object arise at the same time. Because you can't have the basis of designation of the table without having a table. And you only have the table when you impute table onto this basis of designation. But it doesn't become the basis of designation of the table until you've imputed table. Even though this thing existed before the table.
You just can't think dependently.
Huh?
I mean, it just feels like we see things so inherently existent that even when it's pointed out like this, our minds can't wrap around it.
Yeah. Yeah.